It's a great pleasure to have with us today Professor Sonkoly Gábor, Professor of History at the Elte University in Budapest, one of the most important historical Hungarian universities. He's director of Doctoral School for Historical Science at the same university, and he is also the chairman of the panel of the European Heritage Label, supported by European Commission. It's a very important cultural project of European Commission. It's a pleasure to invite Gábor in that context, our project ReIReS. ReIReS is a starting community of 12 European institutions that are building a high qualified infrastructure of religious studies. And the ReIReS project aims to have an impact not only in the academia audience, but also outside academia. Project aims to offer innovative scientific perspectives on historical, social, political, and economic relevance of religious tradition. And this is a pleasure to have some question for our friend Gábor Sonkoly.
Yeah, thank you so much for Professor Marcello Verga for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to discuss this subject with you. And of course, just to start with the European Heritage Label, of course, this is one of the most important means of the European Union to express its own identity through the concept of cultural heritage. And of course, the next question is, what is the role of religious studies and religion itself, and of course, basically Christian religion, in the construction of European identity? So I think the two problems, so the role of religion in contemporary European identity and the role of heritage expressed through the heritage label, cannot be dissociated. And I remember that a few years ago when there was a candidate from Budapest, the biggest synagogue in Europe, the Dohány Street Synagogue, to become a European Heritage Label site. There was a discussion within the panel that maybe just to keep the laïcité of Europe, so keep religion out of this because that's too problematic, there were voices within the panel that we shouldn't elect any religious sites for the European Heritage Label, but finally it didn't happen. And as you could see also, Professor Verga, because you were the member of the panel, the synagogue is still there and it was elected. And I think it was a good choice because heritage actually expresses two problems what contemporary European society is facing with religion. One is the dissociation of culture and religion. European identity was built on the unity of the those, and from the German philosophy from the 18th, 19th century onwards, we took it for granted that big civilizational units correspond big religious units. But as we could see now in the late 20th and 21st century, this is not the case any longer. I just like to quote a French survey from the 2000s when the population of France was 60 million. Out of half of the French declared themselves Catholic, and that's 30 million, and out of the 30 million, only 15 million said that they believe in God. So what about the other 50 million who consider themselves as Catholic and are not believers? So I think we are facing a main question here, how to bring together religion and culture. So that's why I think it's very important that heritage is taking over this role between bridging cultural religion and the religion of the believers in the construction of European identity. And maybe the last point is that religion is always, heritage is always based on rupture. There's always a rupture in time. And I think what happened in the 20th century in Europe, from the perspective of religion, that being believer it became problematic from many social cultural aspects. I think it's now a main question that Europe should appropriate religious heritage. And the European heritage label is probably a very good means for that. Just quoting that this year, of course, I'm not allowed to talk about it, but we received the candidates. There are many religious sites among the candidates, more than ever.
Thank you very much, Gábor. Thank you for your answer. And do religious studies fit into the European context? In what way, in according to what perspective?
I think one aspect is that religious studies should study religion now in the contemporary society. What about the people who don't go to church regularly, but consider themselves religious, so who don't really up to the contemporary or the traditional expectations for a religious person? I think there are so many ways of private practice of religion. So what about them? I think the next question is, what is the cultural meaning or the cultural identity which is attached to a religion? What I exemplified with the French survey. And the next question is, of course, that Europe became multi-religious. So this coexistence of religions. So we have Hindu, Muslim population. So that's also a big question. And of course, it's coming back. Nation building is coming back, especially maybe mainly in the Central and Eastern Europe. But of course, the role of the churches in contemporary nation building is also a very important question. So I think already, and of course, the main question, which is not just political, but also cultural, what is the role of Christian religion in the construction of Europe?
How do religion and religion studies fit into the building process of European citizenship?
Yes, I think that laicite is of course a keystone, but not for every country. So that's also a big diversity, because the northern countries are Lutheran, and as the church and the state are not dissociated. Or what about Greece? So I think that's also, as we always discuss, that Europe didn't start as a cultural project. So all these issues, for example, the relationship between the state and the church, is not regulated the same way in the member countries. So I think that's also, of course, Italy is also a good example for that. So we have to think about that. In that sense, for example, the Hungarian example is, I think it's very progressive, because we had the most liberal law on religion in 1895, and on the second one in 1990. And I remember that if you study, for example, how the churches are financed in different countries, that's also a very good example. So I think religious studies should also deal with that, because it's not just a cultural, but also an economic question. There's huge property, huge heritage, tangible heritage in the hands of the church. And the question is, because the whole heritage issue started with church and church property, right, in France, which was taken away. So who should take care of this? And of course, just the very presence of tangible heritage and the problems of maintenance, that's also in the heart of religious studies right now.
Yeah. You Hungarian people and the Hungarian Republic is, if I remember well, is a lone state member of the European Union with a constitution where you remember Holy Stephen. Your patriotic side for holy for you, okay? What is the situation of religious studies in Hungary now?
Oh, that's a long story. First thing, we are not a republic anymore. We don't have a constitution. We have a state law, basically. Yeah. So it's not that funny, but Hungary traditionally is a multi-confessional state, and this is tolerated. So of course, tolerance is very important. And because in the reform, in the age of the reform, Hungary was divided into three. There's this multi-confessional tradition, which is still tolerated. So, of course, really, at the moment, there's a big takeover of the Catholic Church and the other churches of cultural and educational institutions. I think now more than half of the schools now belong to the church. And that's the result of the last 5 years or 6 years. So there's a huge reorganization of the whole field. And that's why religious studies cannot be very strong, because religious studies are controlled by the churches. So this kind of lay religious studies is very limited. It's only at my university, there's a department for that with 3 persons. But since the churches are so important and so significant, this lay religious studies is more limited. But there's still a discussion between the different fields, but there should be development. And of course, we shouldn't forget we had 40 years of communism when religious study wasn't the most popular subject.
Yeah. I understand, of course.
To say so.
Okay, but all Hungarian students have to learn religious history at school.
No. Of course, students learn the Hungarian and universal history, and of course, with all the papal state, and of course, there are religious aspects, but not just Europe, not just Catholic or Christian, but also Hinduism, Muslim. So these basic. So I think Hungarian students are quite familiar with the basics of religion. And after that, I think it's getting more and more, religious history is getting more and more popular at universities. So more and more students want to understand that, partially because of the current importance of the churches in Hungary, and partially because of the lack of communism when their parents or grandparents didn't know much about it.
I come back to European heritage level, your job now. Okay, but do you think that European heritage level project, but also all projects of the European Union, cultural project of the European Union, could contribute to the knowledge also of the religions, of the religious history of Europe?
I think definitely. I think that's one of at the panel, we have to have many discussions about the involvement of religious sites in the European heritage label. We cannot really construct the contemporary European identity by ignoring the religious past and the religious present of Europe. I think it's very important. So the coexistence of confessions, different religions, what to do with that extremely rich religious tangible heritage what we have, and how to deal with all these people who try to redefine their relationship with religion and with church. Mm-hmm. So I think as I said before, more and more applicants are religious. So there are places of pilgrimage, old churches, abandoned churches. So I think it will be unavoidable to have a deep discussion about this, and not just the European Heritage Label, but the whole European Union, I think, have to deal with religion.
Thank you, Gábor, for your answer. I think that your contribution has been very important for us project and for reflections on the same ideas of our projects. Thank you for all you said us. And thank you very much. And bye-bye, Gábor.